My name's Paul Burns. I'm the head of technology at Brightwave, and as you can see, I'm going to talk to you about the tin can experience. This is not necessarily something that is within my comfort zone. As you probably know, working with technologists, we tend to be sort of hidden in the back cupboard. We've been wheeled out on this occasion because we think this is rather exciting, or somebody convinced me that it would be exciting to stand up here and present to you. So I'll do my best anyway. We can all learn together. The things I wanted to cover today, I was going to have a brief look at what the learning management system offers for us today, principally in terms of its limitations. A look across the landscape. What I mean by that is the technology landscape, which has changed quite dramatically over the past couple of years, and the impact that's having. How tin can help, how we've implemented it, and how that feeds into our thinking about future product development. Some practical examples of applications that we've delivered to date and how we think that tin can supercharge those. And then finally, a commercial break. You don't get to come here for nothing. We get to pitch our new product, and I've been told to mention on as many occasions as possible that apparently somebody yesterday said that there are no tin can applications in production. Ours is in production and available should you want to buy it today. So that's my commercial pitch, and I'll just give you a quick demonstration of that at the end, but point you to this rather wonderful stand over here if you're interested in taking it any further. There'll also be an opportunity, I should mention this, and I'll mention it again at the end just so that you're reminded of it. We are hosting an analytics seminar upstairs, and there are some spaces left for that. So if you fancy a free lunch and some more commercial activity or informative activity, then you're welcome to come to. If you go over to the stand afterwards, you can sign up for places for that. So the learning management system today, it's all about SCORM. I should say this is going to be unashamedly technical, this talk. If you don't know what an LMS is and you don't know what SCORM is, they're acronyms which we tend to talk in on a daily basis, and it's very difficult to get past the fact that we just use them all the time. So I'm afraid you'll have to bear with it. The LMS today is all based around SCORM, which has given us a fantastic standard. It's a robust standard that we've been able to use for years now in order to be able to develop solutions. But it has its limitations. It doesn't deal at all with a disconnected world. And more often than not now, we're using applications on devices which don't always have that connectivity. It doesn't deal with issues of cross-domainness. It's very difficult to request content for the LMS from other domains. We've probably all been involved in solutions where we've had to try and implement creative solutions around that, but they're not the best. They're not the most robust. And although they serve their purpose, they're not ideal. The whole thing is browser-centric. Everything is done through a browser. Everything is done through having a connection through your browser and the SCORM API implemented through JavaScript. Again, that served a purpose, but it's not the way that people use applications now. It's not the way they gain their learning experiences. Those are done through a whole bunch of different applications, be they individual apps, e-readers, smart TVs, whatever you like. There's a whole world of things which exist outside of the browser now. The 70-20-10 model is not very well supported. 90% of our learning is actually done outside of that formal learning context. 10% comes from the content that we serve from learning management systems. And although we've made some sort of inroads into that 90% which doesn't get served from the learning management system, there's still a wealth of opportunity out there, a wealth of experiences that people have that are just simply not catered for at the moment, and that's something where tin can steps in. So those meaningful learning experiences are simply not recorded, and that's something which tin can seeks to address. As I say, the technology landscape has changed quite dramatically in the past couple of years, and really it shows no sign of actually stopping. A few years ago, we could all rely on the fact that we could write design documents for clients, and we would be able to say, well, this will run on this particular machine, more often than not IE6 with Flash 7 or Flash 8. And we could be sure about the fact that our applications would work in that particular platform. More often than not now, the first thing we're asked to do is to develop applications that will run on anything, and then work backwards from there. People expect to use applications and to have them developed for people who are using all manner of devices. And as people become more comfortable with those devices, then they're demanding that they get used in the workplace. So the bring your own device notion is becoming more and more important. So as it says on there, we've got a mixed bag of software and hardware. And again, we've managed to cater for them with a combination of sort of homegrown solutions and things that have been cobbled together. If you bought one of our solutions, it wasn't cobbled together, it was truly planned and implemented very well. But they are things which don't necessarily conform to standard, and they can be slightly eccentric. This is just a slide which comes from a booklet which you should have received on your chairs, actually, if you're here, which I think is quite fascinating. It took approximately 38 years for the radio to reach 50 million users, and it took 13 years for the television to do the same. It took Angry Birds Space Edition 35 days to reach 50 million users, and that's although it's a slightly flippant comparison, it just goes to show the reach of applications now in terms of how quickly those things are adopted. And similarly, once again from that booklet, which I would point you to incidentally, a work of love, the amount of IP traffic which is predicted by Cisco to exist over the course of the next few years, the amount of mobile data is actually quite phenomenal. We're beginning to talk now about exabytes and zettabytes and so on. So it's a whole new terminology that we have to get used to in terms of supporting these kinds of things. There's also been some changes in the actual work or the way we conduct our work as well now. More often than not, we're delivering learning for knowledge workers, and those people are expected to take control of their own learning, to make their own learning opportunities, to gain their own experiences in order to do their jobs better. And more often than not, that's not done through sort of, the prescriptive training through the learning management system. It's done through people going out and finding their own learning, discovering that. And one of the things which we're not able to do at the moment is find a means of tracking that information or recording those experiences, either for the individual, for their own personal development, or for people to be able to share those experiences with other people, so that they might take advantage of those good opportunities as well. So that's something which we consider to be important. And as it says there, the organisations need those people to perform, sharing a corporate vision. And it's something that we sign up to when we contribute those experiences in order that other people can make use of those and gain, the same outcomes as we do. So there's a reality gap, and we need to make that learning more work relevant. So how can TIN help? What does it do for us? It's essentially a modernised version of SCORM. We can still do the basic tracking in terms of SCORM, but it does far more for us than that. Any devices can be connected to the TIN API. We can record any learning experience. We're not restricted by the simple data model that SCORM has always given us in terms of the amount of time that somebody's taken in the pursuit of the completion of a course, or just the score that they attain. There's a far richer data model, and we move away from the LMS having to know about any of that information before it can be served out to people. So as I say on there, we can record any learning experience. That really extends to anything in terms of a whole mix of materials, be that experience, be it going through an online game, for example, or an app, an e-reader, or formal learning. But all of those experiences can now be gained or recorded. Data is freed. By that, what we mean is the fact that the TIN API actually writes into the API access to that data. Before, we've tended with learning management systems, the learning management systems tended to be a bit of a silo where data goes in and it's very difficult to get out. And even when it does come out, it's not necessarily that informative. I think most of us have probably worked on SCORM implementations where we've had to try and interpret the data that's been recorded, and it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. But here, learning record systems, as they're called in the new world of Tin Can talk to one another. The information can be passed freely between them. There's an API which allows developers to write to that. And you can combine those learning record systems. So, for example, you might record information about your learning experiences into the corporate learning record store. You may do it into a personal record store. And that personal record store can then be queried by other people completely outside of your organization to find out about your information. So, for example, imagine your profile on LinkedIn could include information from your learning record system. And finally, correlation. By that, we mean that experiences outside of the formal or of your learning can be brought and made into sort of a meaningful whole in terms of the overall experience that you've gained. And I'll give an example of that in a moment as regards a sales system which we developed. So as it says on there, we can record experience from a whole wealth of sources. Anybody who's looked at the Tin Can API documentation may have seen things like that where people are speculating that, for example, a cardiac resuscitation dummy could provide information back to a learning record system in order to provide evidence of somebody's competence at cardiac resuscitation. We could use simulators, we can use apps or anything. So all of those diverse sources, the Internet of Things is just waiting for us out there in order to start to capture that information. The graphic here, which just sort of underpins that, the fact that that information can be bought from anywhere. This is not the application, this is not the product that we're bringing to market. This is just an example of one of the companies who, I should mention, we're actually now early adopters of Tin Can formally. And this is another company who are equally proud of that notation. It's a company called Hybrid Systems who are developing just with Arduino boards, so simple circuit boards, a card reader. So that card reader can then feed those experiences, or the card reader can be made to feed those experiences into a learning record store. So there's all manner of things out there now that people are developing in order to get experiences into Tin Can. So how does this work in practice? This is just to give you an example of something that we put together recently. We were asked by a large consumer brand organisation to do some training for their sales staff. And what we implemented was a learning resource centre. And it went some way to covering the sort of 70-20-10 aspects of learning, in as much as there was a combination of sort of formal and informal learning resources on there. There was so there was some compliance training. There were a couple of quizzes on there that people had to take, and there were some assessments. And together with that, there was around all of that, there was a whole load of informal learning resources in terms of sort of corporate documentation, guides, and so on and so forth, PDF, web links, some videos, which allowed them to conduct sort of informal learning. And that was all underpinned by an analytics service which we implemented for them. So all of the information that was recorded is then fed back to them in order they can try and make that experience more effective. And we're working with them in order to change that content on a regular basis in order to keep it up to date and make it more effective for everybody. But what it was missing was the context in which all of that training was taking place. It was, as I say, it was a piece for sales training, but it didn't have a link to any of the sales or the performance management system or the sales system, which could show how people were actually applying that in the context of their day-to-day jobs. So for a sales system, one might expect that, you know, we wanted to register the outcome in terms of improved sales, but we couldn't measure from the sales system what people were selling before and what they were selling afterwards in order to gauge how effective that training had been between those two things. And that's something which Tin Can is beginning to introduce to us now. And this is what we mean by the sort of supercharging of the experience. We're adding real-world context to that. So the sales system could either feed information of sales opportunities or the sales that people had undertaken into that tin can learning resource system, or alternatively the learning resource system could request the sales system give it data about the sales figures that people had made. But it adds that correlation and the context in order that we can then find the most effective learning paths that people have taken through that learning and apply those to other individuals or other groups of individuals in order that we can try and raise the performance of everybody by applying those most effective training paths. So we've reached the commercial break. I'm going to give a quick demo of a product, or a service, I should say, which we're bringing to market now, a service called Tesselo, which is built, is underpinned by a combination of our learning management system and a tin can application to gain those experiences. I did make a point at the beginning, for those of you who can remember that far back, by saying everything was browser-based, and that's a limitation. I'm afraid, not being slightly duplicitous, but I'm now going to do this entire demonstration in the context of a browser, but that's just because of the practicalities of demonstrating things on a big screen here. So we can actually do things outside of the browser. It's just okay. I'm already signed in to Tesselo. This is the application interface. We've configured this particular instance for what we've called a sales academy. Obviously, you'll see that the majority of it is based on information which is relevant to food and drink. And this is an example of how we might configure this for people. It could be any industry sector, it could be any group of people who could have one or more of these Tesselo. The idea being that it would be configured depending on what you wanted to achieve from it. So I've logged in here already. This My Learning area is effectively the LMS. So this provides all your compliance training, all the sort of conforming training that you have to do in order to complete any standards that you might have to achieve. And round about it, there are all these areas for us to provide the informal learning services. So to provide the sort of background documentation for various things, in this instance, sales targets and customer services and so on. So that might be a combination of sort of PDFs, links to the intranet, extranet, so on and so forth. But the exciting thing from our perspective are all of the things that we've added onto this in order to use the tin can experience. You'll see down here that there's an area of sharing, and also an area which is my experiences. And if I just go out to another application, this is a way of capturing experiences which obviously for the purposes of demonstration is running on this same machine. But if I do a web search and go, for example, to this particular web page, he says, hoping that yep, okay. You'll see that we've implemented a browser extension up here, which allows us to capture those experiences. And so if I click on that now, bear with me. So as I say, this source could be anywhere. It could be an application running on a mobile phone, which we have tested incidentally. Anything that would feed a record into a learning record store. So that experience has now been saved. And if I go back here, I chose to refresh the page there because it's a lot quicker. That experience has now been fed into the front-end application for me. And that's something which, as I've browsed around the internet and found something which is an interesting resource, which I think could provide a good reference point for myself, going forward, then that's something which I can capture as a simple experience into that Tin Can API, through the Tin Can API into the Learning Record Store. But perhaps more importantly, what I can do now is choose to share that with the rest of the organisation. So anybody who's now got access to this particular Tesselo has now sees this in that shared area. So that experience from anywhere on the internet or through an application or any other source can be brought into the front end here and then shared with everybody else in the organisation. And that means that all of those learning experiences that you have can now be brought into one interface, amalgamated with the formal training from the learning management system, and provide you with sort of an underlying means for everybody to share in that same learning experiences. We've also, there's a layer of sort of gamification and social on there. You'll see that you can vote for various aspects of it. There's a leaderboard which encourages people to come back to it, which are all techniques that people are sort of, well, we're building into applications now. And underpinning this, together with the Tin Can API, then it's also built on sort of an analytics and curation platform as well. So we'll be working with organisations to ensure that that curation takes place in order to make everything more effective and more relevant. And that's it. That is the Tin Can API in actual practice, capturing those experiences from elsewhere, reusing them and applying them in a way which we think is really effective in terms of getting people's learning experiences more relevant and shared, and so on. As I said at the beginning, we're hosting an analytics workshop upstairs. If you would like to attend it, there are a few places, and if you'd like to go to our stand, feel free to register it. It is a free lunch. You will be subjected, obviously, to some sort of commercial message, I'm sure, which includes myself, actually, who needs to make a quick dash up there, and you'll see me again. But do visit the stand. You'll see this application running on a whole bunch of mobile devices, tablets, surfaces, iPads, of all kinds of descriptions. And that's it, and thanks very much for your time.